You know, if you remember, chums, this recently was described by the former royal known as Meghan Markle, the Duchess of Sussex, as her chapter of joy. Remember that? That was a big exclamation, you know, because basically she'd come back into the foray as a social media queen, was very happy, kept telling the world that everything was going really well. But as we knew behind the scenes, with staff leaving at the rate of knots, she had to come up with something. And this was a good sort of title, wasn't it? Something to stick it upon. Now, as this week has unfolded, things have gone less than stellar. This is simply because, once again, Meghan took to the airwaves to, well, remind us exactly what a chapter of joy this is becoming, and more importantly, why we should all be taking business advice from her and what a great success she is. Now, for one, I would say, in fairness, because I like to be balanced, that there were moments when she tried to talk her way out of the fact that certain things had not gone to plan. But, you know, she couldn't really let that go if you think about it, you know. She couldn't really admit to the fact that things hadn't gone to plan. Now, as you know, earlier this year, she tried to get a CEO, and that was an absolute catastrophic disaster because apparently their vision wasn't Meghan's vision, but nobody really knew what Meghan's vision was. You see, behind the scenes, staff refer to her from that song in the very hit musical that starred Barbara Streisand all those many years ago, Second-Hand Rose. You see, it's all about, if you look at the song, and it's a very clever, absolutely, analogy about exactly how everything's second-hand. There's no new ideas. Meghan sees something and suddenly decides that this is going to be her next venture, whether that be fashion, whether that be cooking, jams, spreads, whatever. She sort of takes this on as if nobody's done it before. And as they've pointed out, you can't knock her enthusiasm for around about 40 minutes maximum. And then if it isn't an instant success, she gets very bored very, very quickly. But of course, there were bigger things this week as well, because behind the scenes, there were other problems. That's because during that chat with Emma Grede, well, basically, she said, shock horror, that after only one series with her brand new company, Lemonada, she was now putting that on hiatus. But there were bigger problems behind the scenes. As ever, let me explain. Morning, chums. Lovely to see you. Thank you so much for joining me today on another very special By Royal Appointment. Yes, this is the opportunity where I dig deeper for you to tell you exactly what I found out about the ongoings and comings and everything regarding, of course, the two ex-royals that people really just cannot stop watching. And as I've pointed out before, and people might say, well, you know, well, you're as bad. It is the sort of person, isn't it? This is the way I see it, chums, is that you've had it all. It's almost like winning the lottery, wasting it all and then hoping you're going to get another ticket. How rare does that sort of thing come around? Well, in the world of Meghan Markle, she believes often. And this is now part of the problem. You see, the person that really has supported her all along this is none of her family, not her mother Doria. You could see that in that recent cooking video. Doria really couldn't give a fag, you know. She was there because she'd been roped in. She didn't want to play along with it, and you could see that she's slightly exasperated by her daughter too. And then of course we've got Prince Harry, who can't bring himself to come on camera like he did previously with Jamie and gush about what a marvellous person she is. He's now resorted to just leaving cards out in hotel rooms like he did in New York, or having Jamie read them out literally to her. And so I didn't know that. Oh gosh, you know, marvellous, because that's what it's about. It's about clearly feeding the ego. But this bigger problem, and it was a huge problem because let's not forget, she was riding on the back of the issue of being called a grifter by one of the world's most successful podcasting audio groups. And to come back from that was a feat in itself, it has to be said. Her team at William Morris Endeavour did all they could to pull off the fact that, well, somebody now wanted to sign her. But as I pointed out to you, this wasn't a great deal. It was nowhere in the league of Spotify. There were no millions. This was all about, you need to deliver the hard graft and the guests, and then you will get a percentage. Now what happened, this is where this gets fascinating, is, you see, Meghan couldn't hide behind the analytics, you know, the thing that Netflix are very good at. You know, you don't necessarily know whether a show's been successful or not. We know that nobody watched Polo because finally the figures came out. We know that nobody watched Heart of Invictus. You get the picture. But you see, for Meghan, a podcast lives and dies really like a record chart, like we remember in the old days. It goes in and then it drops out. Well, Meghan went in and then dropped out very quickly. Now, the problem that you have between the sort of scenes, if you like, of Lemonada is this. Meghan had been cruelly, some people say, dumped by Spotify, all because she didn't do any work and they'd paid her a lot of money, and there'd been 25 producers, writers, researchers. You couldn't throw much more at that particular project. And as anybody knows who's had a go at making a podcast, it's really all about doing some research, putting some interest in it, and more importantly, being passionate about the project. Nobody really knew what Archetypes was about, only the fact that Meghan was going to be sitting down in another beige outfit and really revealing all about herself. This time around, though, things apparently were going to be different. You see, Lemonada was all backed by women, and this was the sort of thing that they trumpeted. Meghan was now going to be finally surrounded by a female bunch of people that understood her, and they were there for her, and it was all about girl power, if you were thinking 90s and all that sort of stuff. And of course, you know, I believe these women tried their very best. The problem is when you've had a very, very nice lifestyle, whichever way Meghan wants to paint it, you don't necessarily want to do the hard work. Now, lots of producers who worked with her at Spotify subsequently came out and said they did most of the work. Some of the interviews were never actually done by Meghan at all. She just voiced the things in afterwards. That's as ever, all allegedly. But the bigger problem that Lemonada had, they tested the water, if you remember, with Archetypes, right? And that flopped badly because, you know, you'd heard it once, you don't want to hear it again, right? So why did you want to bother putting it out? But that was sort of part of the deal, that Meghan would have this opportunity for her fans to maybe re-listen to something that they hadn't been able to see the first time around or hear. Now, this is where, again, it gets interesting because you see, at the initial outstage, the contract was paced out as exactly as I said. You know, you would get some money if you got behind it. Now, you cannot say that the team behind Lemonada didn't do their bit. They provided everything they needed to make these successful. But what the hopes that they'd had, and this is really the fight in the podcast world that you really need to put the hard work in, right, chums, is it's your guests. Are the guests interesting? Now, Meghan made the very first problematic mistake by announcing that this was going to be called Female Founders, because you're limiting yourself. It's all about finding something, or foundations and everything, all about females. If she'd have just kept it, you know, chat like, you know, Meghan Meets or something like that, you could have had all number of guests from the world of theatre, from whatever. She didn't want to do that. She was adamant it was going to be called Female Founders. And they knew this was going to be limiting. And boy, did it turn out to be. All the big names that they thought they were going to be able to, you know, include on their platform. And when I say big names, but you would have thought she would have been able to pull in some reasonable sized names at this point. In fact, returnees like, say, I don't know, Oprah Winfrey, who she'd given a lot to for free during their chat a couple of years back. What about astronaut Gayle King? You know, the sort of thing. What about the filmmaker Tyler Perry? You know, a founder, but not necessarily a female, but you get the picture. There could have been a lot more there. But again, Meghan was insistent that this was the deal. And that's the reason why behind the scenes people painted her as second-hand Rose, because she kind of got everything second-hand. You know, they had high hopes when Meghan attended the Beyonce concert, and they thought, right, you know, Beyonce's touring the world, she's done podcasts already, she's helping to promote her thing. No, Meghan ended up with the mother. Right? And I'm not being unkind, but it's kind of like the mother had a book, but it's sort of like, well, okay, we'll do your mother, but we'll definitely need to have Beyonce at some point. That never happened. Now, when questioned about the guests, Meghan said, these are the sort of guests that I find inspiring, and I think my fans and my listeners will. Now, honestly, can you remember any of them? Really? I mean, really? You know, that's the problem. And on top of that, the other problem that they had with Meghan was the fact that she didn't seem particularly keen to go out there and promote. Only at the 11th hour did she suddenly pop up a few bits and pieces on her social media. According to the production team, as ever, allegedly, you see, Meghan just felt that, well, people would tune in, it's her. She didn't really think that by over-basing herself, as she called it, by promoting it very madly out there, well, things were going to be, you know, full of, you know, people were just going to tune in. It was as simple as that. Why would she need to go on a chat show? Why would she need to do a magazine interview? All the things that other people do who are successful. You might say, well, Michelle Obama doesn't do that, but Michelle Obama is a former First Lady, and she's bombing in the podcast stakes as well. No matter what she talks about transitioning and trying to do her best to draw eyeballs to it. It's not working, so it's a very crowded market. So what happened with the hiatus? Well, it's quite simple. They've basically said, why don't we wait until some of these greater people become available? This was an opportunity that Meghan could seize upon by claiming, of course, that suddenly she now wants to focus on her as ever brand, even though that's failing too. But now she's going down this path. There are some people in the world of entertainment that just simply need a manager. You know, that's the thing. You get people, and I've met many of them, chums, as you can imagine, and I've interviewed many, that basically they can't almost, lift a teacup unless the manager says, because they're not clever enough. If you look at somebody like Meghan, very quickly on that recent interview with Emma, she got talking about once again her stint on Suits. And that's simply because it's the only thing that she has to hook herself into. Now, part of the problem again with Lemonada was the fact that they could see there were potential things there. And as I said, Meghan, not very bright herself, because she's giving all of this product away for free. If you take, for instance, the twerking video, right? That was a big eyeballs to screen thing, all for the wrong reasons, very disrespectful to the British monarchy, one might suggest, of course, but something that had been knocking around a long time. As I told you, she's got this brand new promotions team, and they basically said, you need to shock the world, remind them why they fell in love with you. This was their idea, this was the idea that they felt was going to draw people to them. Now, you can understand the interesting thing about this, whether you like it or not. It got people talking, people cringing, people looking away. But once again, she was back in the spotlight under her own terms. Now, the idea, of course, for the podcast would have been, and this was put to her, was, well, why don't you make a special episode about, the reasons behind that, tell your version of events, and don't let the narrative run away with you. Apparently just met with total blank stares. Instead, she threw it away to another podcaster, gave it this opportunity and said, oh, you saw my baby dance? No, it wasn't referred to as twerking or sleazy or whatever you want to call it. No, my baby dance. And then could you see that joy? That was 4 years ago against all this noise. You see what I mean? How dim? And you could understand why people like Lemonade, Netflix are just exasperated, because basically when you have something as powerful as that, she could have changed the entire story, given us the background to how that happened in the hospital. Did she have to get permission? Who filmed it? What was Harry's thoughts afterwards? Now, here's the thing you don't know about that. That was only ever meant to be between the two of them. Apparently that was sacrosanct, and that was that was their moment. And, Harry truly believed that. People knew of the video's existence because he told them, but that was never going to be out in the public domain. So you can understand somebody like Spotify, Netflix, and the like, who have all lost money on this individual, to find out that actually, if you were so willing to give that away for free, why couldn't they have it, given the fact that consequently, if you think about it, they paid heavily for it, you understand. But no, she didn't want to do that again. And that's the reason why part and parcel of the things, these stuff just keep running dry. But the more explosive element of that particular sit down this week was the fact that Meghan once again decided to attack the very people that have been incredibly supportive to her, and more importantly, done nothing in return to receive such a backlash. All you have to look at is the fact that time and time again, she uses those royal connections. You see, Meghan's idea of spilling the tea, that was a reuse, if you remember, of the idea of 40 times 40, when she got her friend to dress up in a frilly outfit with a hat, sipping tea, pretending that's what English people do, mocking the very thing, apparently, that her husband and she held so dear. Right? You understand how this works. Now suddenly, of course, with things to market, and remember this video, this sit down with Emma, was only filmed last week. Well, apparently she had no idea about whether this product could be ready, so she couldn't promote it. So once again, Netflix had to put the thumb screws on to get her to do something very quickly, because she's sitting down with somebody with absolutely nothing to promote, right? Finally, what happened was, eventually, they did the chat, but there was nothing in that. And as I said, the idea with the baby twerking thing, well, that could have really been all of her own. That would have drawn ears and eyeballs to her own podcast. She could have gone down many various opportunistic ideas and thought, well, I could talk about that, my first time at Trooping the Colour. If it was done in a respectful way, talk about the excitement, what it means to British people and what it means to an American thing, they understood that. Apparently, Meghan, no, she didn't want to do anything about her royal life. Many suspect, of course, this is because she's holding back for that potential tell-all book. And if she says one thing on tape, they can roll it back. They really didn't care whether Meghan was telling the truth or not, because, you know, she'd been caught out many, many times before. You know, the secret wedding, all of that sort of stuff. Everybody knew it didn't truly matter. But what they wanted was this. Now, as things progressively got worse this week, and this was truly a big problem for Meghan, you know, she thought that this particular sit down with this particular podcaster, who truly nobody had ever heard of until earlier this week, well, things were going to go radically different. Then they didn't, simply because, once again, nobody knew exactly what the podcast was about. What we were told is that she was a great businesswoman, she was building something, and we could all look forward to being part of that journey. And even though it'd been a flop so far, well, it didn't matter because, you know, she's learning from learns. Now, I'm not knocking her for that. I can understand what she's trying to put out. But the bigger picture that you have when you look at it is you don't sit down with somebody who is successful to talk about something that you're trying to get going that isn't successful. It could have been totally different. Again, you can understand why the company at Lemonada had truly had enough. But over here, things really, really escalated. And that's all thanks to the fact that Meghan apparently once again alluded to the fact that people weren't being nice about her, simply weren't telling the truth. So she put out the question, rather than saying, well, we both made mistakes on each side, of which would have been the more magnanimous thing to say. No, she basically said, well, I just wish people would tell the truth about me. And once again, that spectacularly backfired. One where Harry had to try and intervene. At the start of this video, you know, Meghan Markle has had it all. When you think all the glossies were on board, even things like the cut in the New York Times newspaper, everybody really was giving her the opportunity to shine. None more so, of course, than British Vogue, who made her the very first guest royal editor. I mean, you couldn't get many better opportunities. It's almost like Meghan's won the lottery, as I said, and role reversed it, just blowing it all away with every single stage of the way, almost like she wants to find herself to see if she can do it again. Could she marry somebody as rich? Could she get the exposure that she really craved in order to become successful? So what's happened to all of those, pals like Edward Enninful, Anna Wintour? Well, basically, they've sniffed failure. This is the world of show business. She's not attached to royalty now, and that's the problem that Meghan's failing to grasp. Even though she's still continuing to use her HRH, of which she was going to be called, literally, upon that podcast earlier this week, and only again at the 11th hour did somebody feel better of it, and it wasn't Meghan, you understand. This is where things get very complicated because, she didn't think it'd be a problem. No, she didn't know, as ever, allegedly. But the thing is, let somebody else take the blame. I never said it. You understand how these things work. And of course, so behind the scenes, things are literally crumbling at a very heavy rate. The staff that have left just couldn't take any more. They'd had enough. They were sick to the back teeth of rebrands, re-ideas, working halfway on an idea only for you to be told that's now changed at the 11th hour. This is part and parcel of the problem of working with somebody like Meghan. Her attention span is very, very quick and very weak. So what you thought was a good idea on Monday is now being scrapped entirely by Wednesday, but you better come up with something by Thursday. You get the picture. Now, moving forward, what we saw, in fact, yesterday was yet another relaunch, and this time apricot jam. Never heard of that before. And of course, she took to the social media site to let you know that sprinkles and flowers and stuff were still her thing and they were selling out well. This is not going to make you a billionaire, dear, right? But one idea that she feels that could make her a billionaire is by copying somebody else. And this particular individual, well, she's going to be copying at great length, simply because this has proven to be a very big money-spinning success. And in fact, it's a woman that her husband, Prince Harry, had a secret crush on for many years. We're talking about the Australian pop superstar that is Kylie Minogue, and she has her own very successful wine range. Not alone, of course, many people have that, including the brilliant British pop star from many, many years, Sir Cliff Richard. But Kylie's literally out there on her own. It's a very clever marketing move by her team. Not only does she appeal to young, old, middle-aged, whatever, but her fans that have been with her now for a 36-year career, they like to own a piece of Kylie Minogue. But she's very much worked hard at this, taking the fans with them along the way. Suddenly now, on July the 1st, the obvious date to launch it, right? Go figure. Yes, Princess Diana. Meghan Markle believes that this is the money spinner. This is the one that people will buy because everybody loves a glass of wine, and none more so if you're having a piece of toast with an apricot jam or pancake mix, yeah? So this is the new product. There's no detail about this product of who made it, which country of origin it's coming from, whether she was involved with the tasting or anything like that. There's no promotional video. With less than 2 weeks to go, another product arrives with no backup and no marketing plan. Because, again, she believes that she can get a slice of this Kylie Minogue pie. And this is where it gets interesting, you see, because this is the marketing ideas of what this team had and that have now gone from literally Montecito. They were trying to get Kylie to go on that said podcast as a female founder to talk about the wine, right? A great idea, because suddenly then, of course, Meghan could be inspired by another fellow person, another international icon. You get the picture. And Kylie was in America with her latest tour of Tension. But sadly, that didn't come through. One might suspect, though, that's because she's very much a royalist, very much part and parcel of His Majesty the King's deal and all that sort of stuff, and has a very soft spot for Catherine, the Princess of Wales. Nobody is going to alienate that particular situation for that. But that didn't put her off. Of course, if she couldn't get Kylie to come and sit with her and maybe talk about how she turned a wine range around and Meghan slowly introducing her own range, you see how this works? Well, that was a spectacular flop. So now Meghan's decided that she's going to go it alone. But as I said, 2 weeks to go, no idea where this is going. So what's the future plan after this? According to ex-staffers who have now quit and who are very vocal about their time working with Meghan Markle, apparently she just believes that billionaire status is around the corner. Wouldn't be too long, wouldn't be too difficult, you know. But behind the scenes, they tell me that Prince Harry is literally shot. You know, he can't be bothered going through yet another idea, another formula. You know, this is not his life. His life was very much set out in pace. He knew exactly what he was going to be doing in the summer, as and when, and who would be meeting, charities, etc. Apparently his head's all over the place because 1 minute we're doing this, the next we're doing that. The Invictus is in tatters in many respects because, of course, that's now proving rather difficult after the debacle of Centre Barley, something that once again Meghan's walked away from, but was instrumental, in fact, in absolutely capitalising and bringing it down, because after all, he stood up for her, defending her against Dr. Sophie Chanduka, because apparently she was being bullied, and you know, if Sophie could do something about that. So you see, every sphere that Meghan manages to touch collapses. But Harry, that's not a problem. He's just an out of work royal now, looking after children and making sure that he keeps the funds coming in to, well, keep coming up with these new ideas that whichever Meghan fancies doing next. The idea, which is already tooted out there, in case you haven't picked up on it, is that, you know, she may move into fashion. And this is sort of a direct threat, really, against her one-time chum, loosely speaking, Victoria Beckham, or indeed beauty. You see, Meghan believes, because of the traction, that she thinks people like to know what she's wearing, the sort of makeup that she's using. But her team have told her this, well, dramatic thing, and she's refusing to do it. You see, they said the only way you can find out whether people like an outfit or not is by turning on the comments. And they'd almost got her to agree to this. You see, if you don't know, you're not allowed to comment on anything on her social media posts or indeed the website. But sadly, this new team, as ever, allegedly, have been able to show her some of the backlash that they've received against the recent interview online with Emma, the dislikes and likes. It's a cruel world. I work in it. It can be brutal, trust me. But the thing is, you learn what the audience want. Now, apparently, Meghan couldn't believe it, you know, just could not believe what she was seeing, and believes that there's just a stoke over here, particularly in Great Britain, that, you know, people won't give her a chance. And that's the sort of narrative that she's going down in order to protect herself, you understand. Now, what was fascinating about this was she still will not be persuaded to put on the likes and dislikes and comments on her social media. But they've said they can't go down the beauty route or makeup route unless they do that. Meghan thought by sort of doing the shop edit and all that sort of stuff and linking certain brands that these brands would come to her automatically, but they need to see tangible results. As for Harry, all I can tell you is that he really, really misses life over here. You know, well, he's talked to staff, and really he's a very lonely guy behind the scenes. He might put on a show literally for the pictures and the posts and everything like that, but truly he has a very empty vessel life. He's living it vicariously through his wife, who seemingly is oblivious to what's going on, seemingly because, well, you know, this is all new and an adventure to her. Suddenly she's got money, suddenly she's got a big house, and she's got the world's attention. She doesn't care whether it's for good or bad. Now, as I said at the start of the video, the team have dubbed her second-hand Rose because, again, even the wine thing is a complete lift and borrow from another successful female entrepreneur, international superstar Kylie Minogue. And Meghan is looking around at other people that have done well. You see, the other side of it was, and this is another fascinating bit, that Lemonada were really hopeful that she might be able to get a sit down with Gwyneth Paltrow. But the most that Gwyneth would do was to serve some cold pie in her kitchen. That was the best. But even that was given away on social media. Meghan could have spoken about that, as they pointed out. She didn't want to do it. So as this week comes to a close, and we've now been told that there's all these brand new things that we can all look forward to, and of course within a few days' time, the wine collection, which apparently is going to be extensive, if you believe that, Meghan really is sitting back and looking and saying, well, actually, it's been a successful week. People have talked about her, people have moved on, and she's now been able to shoehorn in the fact that, you know, she's resting a podcast. It's not being fired, she's not being axed, she's decided to rest it. The truth is, everybody's run out of patience. She really knows that behind the scenes, but will never admit it. And again, as I often say here on the show, chums, that is truly part and parcel of the problem. What will next week bring, though? As ever, if you get the opportunity, please do like and share by royal appointment, and if you can, comment respectfully. And finally, I want to thank you for your company as ever. And if you like any of the other videos on the channel, please do get involved, say hello to the chums, and welcome once again one and all brand new subscribers. Until our next royal appointment, Neil Sean in the very heart of London.